Today's conference, considering the influence of the conference in Davos, where I highlighted that the West is at risk due to the rise of socialist statist concepts. Today I will concentrate on the technical foundations that supported those political appreciations at that conference. In this sense, I'll focus on how neoclassical economics and its vision of market failures are functional to the advancement of socialism and how this destroys economic growth by hindering welfare improvements and the fight against poverty. Regarding the genesis of this problem, the problem is a methodological problem between model versus reality. Given that reality is complex to analyze, it is analyzed with models, but in general terms, when the model does not map to reality, one corrects, discards the model. And the problem with the neoclassical world is that faced with this problem, that the model does not map to reality, they get angry with reality, calling it a market failure. The root cause of this problem is related to the study of the normative qualities and characteristics of competitive balance in sports. While the analysis focused on existence, uniqueness, and stability, that wouldn't be a serious problem politically from a political point of view. And in reality, the problem arises when the normative analysis enters the hands of Pareto analysis. Basically, Pareto's optimum is that I can't improve someone without making someone else worse off. If I can improve someone without making another person worse off, that is known as a Pareto improvement in the specific situation where I am able to make an improvement. And obviously, when those opportunities are exhausted, it means we are at Pareto's optimum. And when those opportunities arise, then it is Pareto optimism, which has different names. One of the non-convexities is the presence of increasing returns, or to put it more popularly, concentrated market structures and monopolies. Other instances encompass externalities, public goods, asymmetric information, and the prisoner's dilemma. And in fact, all of these sophisticated definitions are actually elements that facilitate the involvement of the state and along with it, the progress of statists and socialists. To make them less abstract, I'll give an example. Let's suppose we're in the moment using candles for light and Edison hadn't arrived yet. Imagine a time when we relied on candles pre-electric bulb era. Obviously, the moment Edison appears with a light bulb, all candle manufacturers go bankrupt. If we had listened to the interventionists, we'd still be using candles instead of having this beautiful conference with all these lights. Socialists ruin lives. Fortunately, discard Pareto optimum. Advance with technology for a better future. So, the first thing we have to understand is what market is. Having a good definition of what the market is. In this sense, the market is a process of social cooperation where property rights are voluntarily exchanged. In fact, since exchanges are voluntary, it is not possible to speak of market failures because no one would be engaging in self-flagellating actions. Thus, when we accurately define the market, all definitions of intervention collapse. On the other hand, it's crucial to understand the institutions on which the market idea is built. Private property, free markets without state intervention are vital institutions. Because basically, if I am going to be exchanging property rights, it means that private property is important. And if the exchanges are voluntary, there is no place for the intrusive and violent presence of the state. In this sense, when an exchange is made and someone delivers a good in exchange for money, that establishes a historical record called price. And that historical record called prices is a mechanism for transmitting information that also becomes a coordination mechanism because it makes some people become suppliers and others become demanders. Since the demanded quantity does not always coincide with the offered one, when demand exceeds supply, prices rise. In the opposite case, they decrease. To clarify, there is an adjustment process. In short, private property and free markets determine the functioning of the price system, enabling economic calculation. This shows why socialism in none of its forms can work. In the most extreme case, due to the absence of private property, the exchanges required by the market cannot be made. And secondly, the lighter versions that allow the existence of the private sector, the interference of the state makes noise in the price system. And the more state there is, the more violence there is, the more distortion there is, and the worse the system works. Another important institution for markets is what is called free competition, but not in the neoclassical sense of perfect competition, but in terms of free entry and exit. The division of labor was best explained by Adam Smith. A single person could only produce 20 pins, but if the task was divided into 15, each one could produce 5,000 pins. That is, we are talking about 75,000 pins. But what is the problem? If there is no demand for 75,000 pins, there will not be as much division of labor. And this, combined with the idea of social cooperation, ends up being absolutely destructive for socialist ideas. One possibility is that I could be hating him, but I need him to buy my product. So I am inevitably compelled to treat him well. That's why, as Bastiat said, where trade goes, bullets don't go, and promoting free trade is promoting peace. And at the same time, this idea of the market as a process of social cooperation is a tremendous blow against socialism. Because if exchanges are free, that means that both parties involved in the exchange win. Hence, no space for exploitation theory, no space for surplus value, no space for Marxism, and no space for socialism. Simultaneously, it's crucial to note that in market logic, a prosperous entrepreneur is a societal benefactor. In free enterprise capitalism, success is achieved by serving others with higher quality goods at a better price. And if that entrepreneur is not doing well, another one may appear who can provide the same good at a better price or the same price, better quality, and that will lead to the bankruptcy of the inefficient and will enhance well-being. And therefore, entrepreneurs are social benefactors because they provide us with higher quality goods at a better price while creating jobs and progress throughout society. Therefore, let's embrace the entrepreneurs who are the foundation of prosperity. Therefore, given this introduction, it is worth now addressing where the neoclassical dilemma is. This, let's say, within the theory of economic growth and its empirical evidence is called the hockey stick. If you look at history from the Christian era onwards, per capita GDP during the period between year 0 and 1800 was practically constant. However, from the year 1800 until now, it has multiplied by more than 15 times. In that period, the population in 1800 was 800 million people, and now it has multiplied by 10, reaching an astonishing 8 billion individuals in the present time. That is to say, per capita productivity increased, and in addition, GDP increased by about 150 times, to the point that we are in the best moment in the history of humanity. All this despite the existence of the state. And during this same period of significant economic growth, the percentage of people living in extreme poverty decreased from 95% to 5% of the population. However, the existence of increasing returns implies the presence of concentrated structures, namely monopolies, in the market. If it generated so much well-being, why does neoclassical theory say that monopolies are bad if they brought us so much well-being and reduced poverty? In reality, as Rothbard, the creator of anarcho-capitalism, would say, the issue is that neoclassical analysis is incorrect. Let's assume I have 10 companies competing in the cell phone manufacturing industry. And one of them now discovers a technique to make a higher quality phone at a better price. Naturally, 9 firms will go bankrupt. But would any of you complain about better phones at a better price? Therefore, out with the neoclassical theory. So let's see where those errors of the neoclassical theory are. In the simplest form, they claim monopoly price is higher than competition and quantity produced is lower than in competition. That analysis is flawed. There are several things to point out. Only considers the balance in a single market and does not consider the rest of the economy. In other words, I monopolize Javier Milei, and you each have self-monopoly over yourselves individually. That's not bad. Fortunately, we're all different, thank God. We celebrate our differences because we don't like the gray uniformity of socialism. But it's not only wrong because it's a partial equilibrium analysis that neglects other markets, but it's also so crude that it neglects future effects, that is, the impact on the future of these market structures. In fact, this reminds me of a beautiful book by an American economist and thinker, Henry Hazlitt, called Economics in One Lesson. The contrast between a good economist and a bad economist is that the bad economist only focuses on one period's market, while the good economist considers all markets, not just the present, but also the future. Hence, this reveals that the standard analysis of regulated monopolies is a flawed part of economic analysis. And if we also take into account the role that profits play as an element for generating economic growth, furthermore, interfering with the benefits implies a negative impact on growth. So the question is, what is the actual answer, or the actual basis, or the actual cornerstone of this analysis? In fact, the answer is not in economic analysis, but in the math structure of general equilibrium. In other words, it basically has to do with the analysis of Pareto's optimum and the problem of non-convexities in production sets. In essence, for the existing balance to be Pareto optimal, it is crucial that both consumers and producers strive to maximize their outcomes in order to achieve the Pareto optimum. The problem arises when we have increasing returns, as this leads to the presence of convex production functions in our system. And the problem with those functions is that a maximum cannot be found. Naturally, that is a mathematical error too. Because if I have increasing returns, I can find a maximum if I use all the endowments of the economy. Then another problem would arise there, which would leave me with only one company. But that, which seems empirically correct, also has another conceptual error. Because basically, it implies not knowing the nature of the signature, and among other things, it overlooks the fact that signatures are handled by human beings. And naturally, the larger the amount you wish to work in order to generate more, the opportunity cost of free time grows exponentially and becomes increasingly significant. What good would a job that provides you with a salary of $12 million per year be if you were required to work 7 days every week for 24 hours each day? They are going to collide with their own humanity. However, neoclassical analysis treats firms as if they were machines and not as companies that depend on and are owned by human beings. Finally, another critique made against monopolies is that they actually generate lower quantities of goods produced in the economy. And that is also false, because all that money that monopolists earn can obviously be poured into consumption and generate production and employment in other areas of the economy. But wait, now we're going to do a couple of cases that will irritate Keynesians even more. What occurs if we save those large profits? Now that savings is converted into investment in other companies, and that generates growth in product and employment in other sectors. Nothing is lost. Or suppose that this monopolist is so ambitious that he wants to invest everything in his own company, such that all their savings turn into investment, but that investment brings more capital, productivity, higher wages, and at the same time more production of the good, lowering the price. Thus, higher salaries and lower costs lead to increased welfare benefits for all individuals. Furthermore, since we can no longer find more attacks on the monopolist, as consumption generates well-being, if one saves in the financial system, it generates well-being, and if one saves and invests in oneself, it also generates well-being. Now let's consider the scenario where the businessman, against our wishes, chooses to bury the money instead of utilizing it. No one can access that money. What will happen? The money in the economy will be reduced. Prices will decrease, benefiting the entire population. And what's more, this bad businessman, those who benefit most are those who have least because they benefit from deflation. Therefore, what we have just seen is that all the analyses that justify intervention only create more state and cause greater harm to people. Therefore, in conclusion of this presentation, I am going to demonstrate how socialist intervention ultimately leads to the destruction of the economy as a whole. And essentially, this attack that the socialists launch originates from two different points of view. Basically, on one hand, there is the regulation of monopolies, which breaks the effect of increasing returns and causes economies to stagnate. Furthermore, if regulated under neoclassical ideal, quasi-rent would be zero. Thus, in a world of perfect competition with no incentive to grow. Essentially, it aborts the process of creative destruction a la Schumpeter, because these processes start from the idea of solving a societal problem to earn more money, which generates technological progress and growth. Hence, if I control the benefits, if I control the profit, the issue is that I'll experience stagnation. Besides the fact that regulating prices and quantities destroys property rights, actually, I'll tell you about Argentina, a country I know. A country that began the 20th century as one of the richest in the world. Yet today it ranks 140th globally with over 50% in poverty and over 10% in extreme poverty. And when one looks at the number of regulations, one will understand why. In our government teams, we have found currently 380,000 regulations that impede the functioning of the economic system. And in fact, our two main initial measures of structural reforms, the decree of urgent necessity, and the basic law proposals that aim to provide more freedom to Argentines, move towards more competitive market structures, and above all, eradicate corruption from politics. We face significant opposition from the beneficiaries of this decaying system that impoverishes honest Argentines in favor of the corrupt elite. Corrupt caste composed of thieving politicians prioritizing privileges over Argentinians' well-being, pre-sales businessmen doing business with corrupt politicians, corrupt media outlets angry because we eliminated official advertising. Also, let's say, for unionists in businesses against the people, and also, let's say, for professionals functional to the state religion, making a living defending corrupt people. Hence, they'll be aware of the fight we're fighting, but we won't give up on becoming Argentina great again. The other main threat that socialists and statism attack is essentially the discussion between efficiency and distribution of resources, where there it is pointed out that capitalism is a hyper-individualistic system, and it is compared to socialist altruism with other people's money, always with other people's money. And this deviation is being carried out in the name of social justice, which is seen as a justification for this abnormality. Where Hayek spoke of the words weasel, where every time they placed an adjective on him, it signified the complete opposite. As Jesus Huerta de Soto says, social justice is violent and unjust. It is an aberration, not just social or anything. Firstly, it's unfair as it implies unequal treatment under the law involving social justice. It's stealing from one to give to another, making social justice violent and unfair. In the same sense, this is worsened by the concept of unlimited democracy. That is, democracy was initially created to uphold the rights of the smallest of minorities, the individual. But when socialist ideas enter, and the idea of unlimited democracy enters, populism appears. But so that it doesn't remain something so abstract, I'm going to give you an example. Let's suppose that 4 wolves and a chicken gather together. Currently, we'll vote on our dinner choice for tonight. It's important to note that they've already eaten the chicken dish. Ultimately, that is also the outcome in the economy. The hen that lays golden eggs is the specific part that creates wealth. However, due to income distribution, 80% of the population has an income lower than the average income level. And that's when the populist politician appears, who says that we have to take from the rich to give to the poor. Not only Venezuela, Argentina, and all Latin American populism. And when that happens, the benefits are destroyed, and economic growth is also destroyed. If you want it in practical terms, Argentina is a country that produces food for more than 400 million human beings. Another aspect that is also discussed and that socialists frequently talk about, and that has to do with income distribution, and that they argue is unfair and inequitable, is the way the system operates and the disparities it creates. Socialists emphasize the need for a more just and equitable system that addresses these issues and ensures a fairer distribution of resources and opportunities for all members of society. There is a lovely book by Israel Kirchner titled Creativity, Capitalism, and Distributive Justice. And that book begins with the hypothesis that Kirchner affirms, yes, that is, the capitalist system is more efficient, but if it were genuinely unfair, there would be no justification to advocate for it. And in that sense, it works on 2 ideas. Works with Locke's principle of appropriation. That is, whoever discovers it keeps it. If you find something, you own it. And the other idea is Hayek's idea of the market as a process of discovery. In fact, the idea of the market as a process of discovery implies that there is no cake to distribute, but that cake is created as it is being produced. Hence, if the cake is being uncovered while you are making progress in the production process, it is only logical that the person who uncovered it should claim ownership of that cake. And the truth is, let's say with all this, the socialists have us more than in a state of checkmate. I'd informed them, that's why I'm going to give him one more. I'm going to give him an encore performance. Naturally, when one regulates monopolies, regulates companies, blocks competitive processes, and at the same time introduces the concept of social justice, obviously that leads to stagnation. And that stagnation, given population growth, leads to gradual impoverishment of that country. And how do they correct this? They correct it with the killer abortion agenda. A killer agenda that we can trace back to its origins, with the Egyptians trying to exterminate the Jews, or with the case of Malthus, with his treatise on population and the iron law of wages that promoted birth control. Or closer, let's say in the late 1960s, the Club of Rome, where the Club of Rome said that since the world was moving with fossil energy, and since those energies are not renewable, they predicted that by the year 2000, those resources would be depleted. And yet, let's say that situation was going to generate that there would be no food for everyone, and that we were going to die, and that only 1 billion people would remain on planet Earth. Based on that, today, with the declassification of the Nixon and Kissinger files, we now know they proposed a murderous abortion agenda where children's parenthood has more locations globally than McDonald's. Luckily, they were wrong again, as today there are 8,000 billion individuals living in the world. However, they don't stop in that murderous agenda. Post-Marxism, after its defeat in the economic sphere, transferred class struggle battles to other aspects of life. For example, environmentalism, where it proposes the struggle of man against nature, where they blame the human being for global warming, when this has already happened 4 times in the history of planet Earth and the human being did not live. To fix this problem, the neo-Marxists propose nothing but exterminating humans as their solution for it. If we had a resource problem, we should wait to colonize other planets, not doom ourselves, for example. In reality, all of those analyses that are against population growth are completely false. So I also want to mention the case of a highly optimistic economist named Julian Simon, who emphasized that population growth resulted in additional technological advancements. So, for example, it pointed out that there was technological growth driven by demand, where basically there were more people and there were problems of scarcity and so on. That impacted the price system and created new reforms and technological advances to address these problems. And on the other hand, it pointed out the technological progress driven by the supply side, where, for example, the chances of having a Mozart in my population are much greater if 1 million people live than if 10 people live. In summary, the message is as follows: do not allow socialism to make progress. Do not endorse regulation. Do not endorse the concept of market failures. Do not allow the advancement of the killer agenda. And do not be swayed by the sirens of social justice. I'm from a country that bought all those dumb ideas and went from being one of the richest nations to 140th place globally. Therefore, do not relinquish your freedom. Persevere in the fight for your freedom. Because if they do not fight for freedom, they will be led to a condition of misery. But I also want to leave you a message of optimism. Argentina seemed like a country of sheep, condemned to the poverty that socialists impose on us. And I recall when I began my political career to be a national deputy, I stated that I didn't come to guide lambs, I came to awaken lions. And so it was that every day we woke up more lions. And the message of freedom not only led us to the presidency of Argentina, but we are also awakening the whole world. I am extremely grateful for your kind assistance. Thank you very much for your invaluable help and support.